kinds of digital money and cryptocurrencies promise to rescue us from middlemen and authorities that we've traditionally relied upon to transact with each other. We're now joined by Simon Dingle, live from Cape Town. Simon, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start off with looking at why you chose to write this particular book.
Hi, Anastasia. I don't feel like I did choose to write the book. I was approached by my publisher, Tracy MacDonald, and she said, look, we've heard you speaking about cryptocurrency and you've been working in the space for a while. Would you consider writing a book about it? And so I thought, well, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. And I ended up writing a book, which was a process I thoroughly enjoyed.
So let's talk about that process, because for many people, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and blockchain is very complicated. How easy or difficult was it for you to be able to outline your thoughts and the facts in a way that the reader would be able to understand it and it makes sense?
You know, I quite purposefully made the book very short and concise. You can read it in an afternoon. That, of course, suited me very well because it meant that I needed to commit less words to paper, although some people will tell you that writing a short book is more difficult than writing a long one. But I wanted it to be something that wasn't intimidating, that was approachable, that laid things out in simple language, and that you could, you know, like I said, you could digest it in an afternoon. So I try to keep it very simple, because you're right. It is perceived as a very complicated topic, especially by people who spend too much time delving on the technology itself. And I think that's an important point, is it's easy to get enamored with technology when really that's not the important thing. It never is. You know, your smartphone enables all sorts of amazing things in your life. The ability for you to stay up to date with the news, to speak to your friends, to see what people on the other side of the planet are doing. None of that has to do with technology specifically. The technology enables it, but it's really the story that's more important. And so what I've tried to do with my book is focus on the story, the narrative around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and what it enables for us to do as human beings, instead of spending too much time getting into the nitty-gritty of the technical details.
Let's take it back a little bit, because we can trace Bitcoin back to 2008 to this mysterious message that was put on this cryptography mailing list by a character by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. What do we know about his identity and the many stories of people purporting to be him?
Well, we know a few things about Satoshi Nakamoto. We know that whoever Satoshi was spoke about themselves in the plural quite often. So you'll see in the Bitcoin white paper, which was what was published in 2008 and started this whole movement, really, Satoshi says we and us in the white paper a lot. He'll say we've been working on, etc. The reason we refer to Satoshi as male is because Satoshi is a Japanese name that's often used for men, just like John is used in the West. So we say he, although Satoshi could have been a woman, of course. But the interesting thing about open source technologies and open movements is that they take on a life of their own. It doesn't really matter who Satoshi is. We know that Dave Kleiman, who unfortunately is deceased now, we know that that character was part of the Satoshi project. We know that another cryptographer by the name of Hal Finney, computer scientist and cryptographer, that he was involved. There were various people that contributed to this project. We can't say definitively exactly who Satoshi Nakamoto was, and we might be entirely wrong about all of the things I've just said. But it's fantastic to have that little bit of intrigue as well. And of course, it also adds to the narrative of Bitcoin. There's this mysterious figure who, because they're fictitious in a way, is beyond death, is beyond, you know, being outed as a less desirable character, and that gives Bitcoin a sort of a strength as well. It helps to have a mysterious founding character as part of the narrative.
There's one part of the book where you talk about how there can only be 21 million Bitcoin in circulation, which might make somebody wonder what happens when the last Bitcoin is mined.
That's a fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked that, because a lot of people think that you have to buy one Bitcoin, you know, just like you get 1 cent or 1 rand, when the reality is that every single Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million base units that we call Satoshis or sats. So just like 1 rand can be divided into 100 cents, 1 Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million sats or Satoshis. And that means that you don't have to own 1 Bitcoin. You know, a Bitcoin at the moment is trading for somewhere around $160,000. 10,000 Rand. But you can buy 10 Rands worth of Bitcoin and you'll have a few sats, just like you can have a few cents. The reason that a finite supply was put on the Bitcoin network is to make the currency deflationary. Now, if you're used to what we call fiat currencies like dollars or rands, those are inflationary currencies. One unit of the currency becomes less valuable in time. I mean, if you think back to when you were a child, what you could buy for 5 Rand versus what you can buy for 5 Rand today, it's a very different story. The opposite is true for Bitcoin. Bitcoin becomes more valuable per unit over time. It was designed to have that finite supply because, of course, value and price is determined by supply and demand. So one Bitcoin goes up in price while 1 Rand goes down in price. And that, in a nutshell, there's more to it, but that in a nutshell is why we have this finite supply. But it doesn't matter because we can divide each Bitcoin by 100 million units. There's more than enough for everybody in the world.
All right, Simon, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That is Simon Dingle talking about his book, In Math We Trust. Our recommended book for the week is The Algebra of Happiness, written by Scott Galloway. It's a book that tells how you can live life and navigate through it and negotiate better to maximize happiness and minimize the inevitable stress, delivering practical advice and hard-won wisdom on everything from when to own property to how hard to work. This is a self-help for anyone struggling with life's big questions. Well, we'll have more news at the top of the hour with Francis Hurd, but for now, your weather's up next.